Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we all know that ever since Colin Kaepernick, the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, decided to come out and say that he would refuse to stand up for the national anthem because he believes that this nation has been still oppressive of African Americans, as he put it, and therefore it was not deserving of honor and respect. This irrespective of the fact that he has a massive salary with the National Football League, and that he has amassed such great wealth, and that he has a large home, beautiful, wonderful cars that many Americans could never hope to dream to own. But no, he still wants to go on about the institution of slavery that has been outlawed ever since the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which occurred in 1865. Folks, that was 151 years ago. No one who was alive at that time is alive today, and it just goes to show the great extent to which the intellectual disingenuousness of these frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists who engage in the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactics and strategies of identity politics and divide and conquer are willing to go, and just how bad it is. And really what it shows above all else is that they are putting forth a false narrative. They're trying to sit there and make it a systemic thing, meaning a system of racism. And that's what they try and claim. Of course, what does this really mean? It means that the system has gone so far to do away with racism, and that the United States of America is clearly one of the most egalitarian, if not arguably the most egalitarian nation on the face of God's green earth. But that doesn't matter to these people, because they have a false narrative. They have a propagandistic agenda that they refuse to divorce themselves from, that they refuse to distance themselves from, and therefore they do everything within their power in an attempt to politicize everything and the facets of our daily lives. Of course, this is what the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned about in near prophetic fashion back in the 1950s and 60s in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard. He said that they would engage in divide and conquer, they being the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who had done everything to try and infiltrate our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border. And of course, he focused primarily on Harvard because that is the first institution of which they successfully infiltrated and began to force their dark and twisted machinations down the throat of an unwilling public. You see, it's always within the ivory tower that the frothing at the mouth left-wing ideologues and Fabian socialists are able to sink their claws into society. The reason being is that there are impressionable youths who are within the campuses and who are very malleable at that point, as they are lacking in life experience and they are attempting to spread their wings for themselves. So therefore, any one of these sorts of ideas that would seemingly be fair in a sense, or which is couched rather disingenuously in weasel words, for lack of a better term, to try and claim that it's a better system, that it's a fair system, and that what has come before is unfair, that it leads them down the wrong path. It leads them to make erroneous conclusions, and it perverts their minds through indoctrination. Of course, that's exactly what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have always been about. They have always been about indoctrination. Because deep down in their souls and in their heart of hearts, they realize that no one in a free marketplace of ideas would ever accept their frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist agenda. Why? It's because their agenda truly would be considered theft by any other name. Folks, there really is no way around that. It is what it is, and unfortunately, it has taken root in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to convey with respect to this, but we see, particularly as of last summer, which we have dubbed here at Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer as the summer of political correctness, these things have not improved. And they aren't going to improve until we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, begin to put our foot down and begin to reclaim the reins of political power. Now, in social media, I've noticed that people that were in academia when I was in school, teachers that I once looked up to even, have gone so far as to say that identity politics are everything. And they go out and say that these progressive agendas are necessary and that the Constitution is antiquated and that racism is a systemic and inherent problem of these United States of America. Now, when you ask for proof of it, they try and point to the Jim Crow laws that were shot down with the Civil Rights Act back in the 1960s and 50s. It doesn't make sense. Integration has occurred, except that now when you look at some of the institutions that are out there, they want to bring back separate but equal, particularly in the field of study known as African American Studies. Now, what could you do with the field of African American Studies or women's studies or any of those identity politics-based social justice type curricula and degrees? There really is nothing you can do with it. There is no practicable real-world skills that are associated with it. And this is part of the reason why a collegiate degree or an undergraduate degree has been debased and devalued. But more than that, it's based on supply and demand as well. One of the great travesties is we've said that college educations would necessarily push people up to the forefront. And yes, it does open a lot of doors, or at least it did at one time. But when you think about it, when everybody has a college degree, it begins to devalue the degree itself. It becomes the equivalent of a high school degree, and a high school degree has lost basically all of its value as well. But at the same time, we see that there is this notion of doing manual labor that is seen as that somehow lesser, and that anyone who engages in that is really not contributing to society, irrespective of the fact that there is very high-paid jobs for skilled labor, that there is a need for it, and then at the same time we see that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist types and those that are in the technology and information fields are saying that they need a bunch of H-1B1 visa applicants. Now, the H-1B1 visa, folks, is for technologically trained foreigners to come into the United States, and they're typically from India, but they can be from other nations as well. And the companies like Disney, which we've pointed out in an episode many, many months back, had basically taken their American technological people and forced them to hire, or not hire, but train their replacements that would be working on pennies for the dollar in comparison. Now, I'm all about free enterprise, and I'm all about business doing well, and I'm certainly not in the mindset of America shutting its doors entirely to legal immigration, but we have to be cognizant of the fact and be realistic in the application towards this, that it does on massive scales harm the American people. particularly when there are no safety checks placed in it. Now, I can already hear in the back of my head that a lot of people are saying, well, that's the same position that the alternative or alt-right has taken with respect to this 2016 election cycle, and that is why they have been so emergent within the system of American polity. But no, it's not quite the same. Because I still believe in this notion that in these United States of America, what makes us a great nation is found in the clear and concise language inside the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And that means that the natural law tenets that are the bedrock and principal foundations of our nation, our Constitution, as well as our other foundational documents, makes it quite clear that we don't have a race-based system for nationalism or a national identity. Now, nationalism per se, when you take it into the context of the natural law tenets that underpin this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, is not a bad thing. But when you start to try and break it down into the facets of identity politics, as the alt-right does, and as we're seeing with respect to Colin Kaepernick and some of these other National Football League or NFL players who decided to protest on 9/11, the 15th anniversary of those dastardly, deliberate atrocities and terrorist attacks that claimed the lives of 3,000 innocent Americans, it shows there is a major disconnect. There is a type of polarization that is impacting the United States of America, leaving us more divided than we have been in our relatively brief yet illustrious history since 1860. Now, folks, as a reminder, 1860 was the year before the war between the states, or as it's known in the common vernacular, the American Civil War began. We are as divided today as we were then, and it's distressing. This should send chills down the spine of every decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizen, because if you recall, the bloodiest conflict that this nation has ever faced was when American citizen faced off against American citizen in the war between the states. It's a dangerous position. It was a long, drawn-out, bloody affair in which major portions of the American population were wiped out. An entire generation vanished from the societal fabric of the United States of America. And some of the scars that were unleashed during that bloody conflict are still felt to this very day. Take, for instance, what we saw last summer with the assault against the so-called Southern Cross battle flag, the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia that was proudly carried by Confederate soldiers into battle. It was erroneously connected with the twisted machinations of that deranged individual named Dylan Storm Roof, who carried out that senseless massacre at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in June of 2015 there in Charleston, South Carolina. The feckless, spineless detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, along with the raging and fanatical Fabian socialist-controlled Democrats, decided to not base this on the fact that there is this sort of raging social justice mentality that is literally tearing this nation apart at the seams. No, they decided to do what they do best, and that is to avoid the problem by trying to blame an inanimate object and to work towards unraveling at an exponential rate our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. You see, the dangers of historical revisionism and this notion of the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism is an undeniable problem that continues to haunt this nation. And unless and until we begin to rise up and address these problems, these things are only going to get worse. We are only going to bear witness to this nation of ours, this beloved nation of ours, continue in this tailspin, this death spiral that is afflicting us, and it will continue not only unabated, but it too will accelerate at an exponential rate. But when you consider in an objective fashion that these United States of America are currently in the grips of both an identity crisis and a slew of constitutional crises that have been brought about by the failings and shortcomings of both mainstay political parties, you see that it is something we can ill afford to allow ourselves to go down this dark and twisted path to which there seemingly is no end in sight. You know, folks, it's important that we reevaluate these things that are bothering us, that we start to try and find solutions. And that's one thing that this 2016 presidential election cycle has been drastically lacking in, for lack of a better term. The reason I say it's lacking is when you stop and consider exactly what it is that we're facing. The solutions for it should be simple, straightforward, something that should not even be questioned, because the solution and the key to unlocking these chains and shackles of governmental tyranny, bondage, servitude, but above all, oppression, has been with us since the inception of our nation some 235 plus years ago. That key, of course, which I speak of, is none other than our shared United States Constitution. But so many do not find value in it. People like Edmund Kozak over there at Laura Ingram's LifeZet News do not care about the Constitution. They say that we are rabble-rousing in worshiping the Constitution, mistaking it for perfection. But again, as I have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, nothing could be further from the truth, because the Constitution does not constitute a perfect document. In fact, the opening lines to the preamble to that document state that we, the people, meaning the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this nation, do ordain and establish this Constitution in order to create a more perfect union. Now, what does that mean? More perfect. More means closer to. But it means also that it is a qualification, that our founding fathers inherently understood that in this mortal realm, in this realm in which we live, it is impossible to attain and achieve perfection. That's just one of those inexorable facts that we cannot escape. It's part of the human condition. But you see, this deeper line of thought, this deeper strain of intellectualism is not something that is discussed in our ivory towers of education from coast to coast and border to border. It's certainly not covered by the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Why? Because again, they have this dark and twisted machination and propagandistic Fabian socialist agenda to tear America apart, to pit American citizen against American citizen, and they have eked it out so that it is influencing and impacting every facet of our daily lives. It's why Alexis de Tocqueville, that great French philosopher who I have mentioned almost to the point of ad nauseum here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, said that anyone who supports any form, flavor, or facet of socialism is in fact a New Age feudalist. Again, it's because it's a caste system. The left always seems to be so embroiled with and fascinated by these caste systems. Why? Because, again, it's not about individual intellect. It is about this notion of collectivism. That's what they care about. That's what they work towards. That's what they believe. But when you stop and take a step back, looking at this in an objective fashion, you see that that really has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States of America. Yes, there is a greater good, known as the general welfare. You see that in the preamble to the United States Constitution. But what that means is that the government must provide for its own ability to run while not infringing upon or abridging the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. But that has broken down. It's broken down because for the past century and a half, these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have meticulously, relentlessly, unyieldingly assaulted the very base and foundation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Again, it all ties into a plan, a well-orchestrated plan, a long-term scheme that is not based on instant gratification, that is not disorganized. If there is one complaint that could be properly levied against the right in this nation, it is that we, more often than not, fall into the trap of being disorganized, that we are a ragtag bunch of groups that just are seemingly incapable of coming together and of creating an overarching long-term plan. But if we ever hope to realistically place this nation back onto the path to prosperity, we are going to have to find a way to unite. And again, it's really not that difficult to find the grounds upon which we can unite. It's the Constitution. You see, that's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, more often than not, in fact, almost every episode state that it's so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because in doing so, we learn what it is that unites us. We learn what it is that defines us both as a nation and as a people, and that allows us to move forward to advance and advocate for the best interests of not only ourselves, but our fellow popular sovereigns, and indeed the up-and-coming generations, as well as those which have yet to be born. And once again, when you look at the language of the Constitution, you see that it mentions in the preamble, once again, that it was meant to be handed down for our progeny. That means those up-and-coming generations, and indeed also those generations which have yet to be born. Again, it explains why I have so oft-times said that with respect to the Constitution and the natural law tenets that are the basis of it, that our law, our natural law, is by its very nature timeless, meaning it's just as applicable today as it was 235 years ago at the inception of this nation, as God willing it will be some 235 years from today. But again, it requires that we, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, be proactive in maintaining and safeguarding those fundamental and inalienable rights. It means that we must foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution and our rights, and be willing to put our foot down and say no to those major forces that are seeking to divide and conquer we the people. That just cannot be allowed to continue. We cannot allow this sort of divisiveness, this sort of negativity, this sort of hatred to become a new and well-established norm in these United States of America. The reason that I say that with as much emphasis as I do sitting here speaking into the microphone is because deep down, there is only one thing that unites us as a nation and as a people. By the very design that our founding fathers put forth, with the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in all of world history, we are unified, defined, and brought together via the Constitution. And contrary to what the alternative or alt-right would have you believe, it is not based on race. It's not based on blood. It's not based on ethnicity, gender, culture. The culture arises from the law. Again, it brings attention to that old classic adage that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. Equal protection under the law, due process, and full faith and credit, privileges and immunities. All of these aspects of the Constitution, which upon a cursory glance may appear holistically abstract in nature, are actually fundamental tenets and principles which are written on the hearts and souls of each of us in our capacity as citizens, whether we be natural born or naturalized. You see, when we say that the Constitution is the greatest birthright or inheritance of any people on the face of God's green earth, we mean that the Constitution secures our rights. We understand that the natural law tenets are universally understood if you apply objective reasoning and logic to them. This is another reason why the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists move forth with their twisted and diabolical agenda to try and make people whipped up into an uncontrollable emotional frenzy. They fully understand that by causing people to rawly emote, they shut down their mental faculties and capabilities, and thereby stop trying to logically comprehend things. It makes them controllable. It makes them act as a mob. In fact, democracy was so inherently distrusted by our founding fathers that they decided to create the nation as a federalist representative republic. In their mind, a democracy was nothing short of mobocracy. That's what they thought it conveyed, that's what they thought it did, and therefore they inherently distrusted it. We must fully understand why it is. It is because under the Enlightenment era thinking, which Fabian socialist and alt-right members alike just loathe and despise, the individual matters. What was it that was God's greatest gift to humanity? Going back to the creation story, it was free will. Remember, God allowed the people, or particularly Adam and Eve, to make a decision. He told them not to. But instead of destroying them when they disobeyed his command in Genesis, when they partook of the fruit of knowledge, or fruit from the tree of knowledge, he just banished them from paradise, but he did not destroy them. That is unique. It shows again that intellect, or free will, is such an intrinsic part of humanity. And it also explains why the Enlightenment era saw the great importance of individual liberty, and that it placed such an emphasis on the rights of sovereign popular individuals. And so what our founding fathers did that was so revolutionary, that had never been attempted before throughout the course of human events, was to say that sovereignty ultimately rested in the hands of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. That had never been done before. That was unique. It is still a unique aspect of the United States, and it is why our system of government and polity has been the most open, honest, but above all free in the course of human events. But we see that these nefarious forces that have infiltrated every facet of our daily lives continues to operate in such a fashion as to try and deliberately weaken us, both as a nation and as a people. And we can ill afford that. And we know that they engage in that because deep down it is this self-loathing that they have, this loathing of society in general and what we are hoping to accomplish, both as a nation and as a people. But where it really gets bad is how it has eked into every aspect of civilization or society or culture in general. And one of the areas that I want to point this out is that the NFL commissioner, who goes by the name of Roger Goodell, came forth and said that he supports Colin Kaepernick in his efforts to fight against perceived past harms and perceived just failings of the system or perceived racial animosity that really is not something that we should consider, that's really not even applicable anymore. And I've got a soundbite relating to this that I'm going to bring up, and just to make sure that we don't have any hiccups with bandwidth, I'm going to temporarily turn off the camera as I bring that up. But let me switch over now So camera's off, and we'll switch to the monitor and begin. So here we go.
In a league that I think the majority of the players are African American, do you want the league to take a leading role in bringing attention to issues like the one that Colin Kaepernick is bringing attention to?
Well, I think our history is that we do. We play a role in society, an important role in society. We understand that. We're careful about that because we still believe that at the bottom, people come to enjoy the sport. They come to enjoy the game. But they recognize the importance that the NFL plays in our society, and we all have to be responsible for that. It's an important role, and it's one of the things that we spend an awful lot of time focusing on.
Are you proud of Colin Kaepernick for taking this stand?
Listen, I support our players speaking out on issues that they think need to be changed in our society. We don't live in a perfect society, Matt. Our players have strong views about things. So I support our players speaking out against that. But that's what the focus should be on, the changes he wants to see in our society.
Right, but are you proud, or does it make you nervous when you see it?
Well, I think when our players speak out and they feel strongly and passionate about something, I think it's a good thing for us. What I do believe, though, is the respect for our country, the people who have fought for those freedoms and those values, the people who protect us here and abroad. I think those are very important, and you're going to see it on Sunday. We're a patriotic league.
Yeah, Sunday, by the way, is the 15th anniversary
Yes,
of the attacks of 9/11. A heightened sense of patriotism. Is it going to be more difficult to see if players kneel or sit for the anthem on that day?
I don't think so. You know, we encourage our players to be respectful. We want them to do this so, but they also have rights, and we have to respect that.
You may know that you're also in the headlines for some other reasons. Tom Brady is going to sit out the first 4 games of the season, right? Suspension as a result of what we call Deflategate. Can you look me in the eye and...
So what we see here is that he's just literally trying to, say that they can have their rights and act upon that without actually being held accountable. And it goes beyond all belief, because it shows that he has embraced this whole notion of identity politics, and that he is engaging in the same sort of thing that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists always engage in, and that is this divide and conquer, and to try and dissipate any reliance on self-accountability, self-responsibility, and those things working in tandem to create self-determination. And so what he really is going forth there and doing is saying that, look, they have rights, but they can't be held accountable for acting upon their rights. Well, yes, they can. And it is time for the fan base of the National Football League to put their foot down, because what we see here is that these players are engaging in a truly adversarial approach. They are attempting to incite bitterness. They are attempting to incite division. And particularly when this was occurring on the 15th anniversary of those dastardly attacks carried out by those Islamo-fascist barbarians, we cannot ignore what message that sends. So you have to hit the NFL where it hurts, and that's within the wallet. And I think you're going to see a huge pouring of outrage from the fans. In fact, it has already started. But why is it that things like this require that sort of response? Why is it that these league owners or these commissioners, or in the case of Target, their CEO and their board, have to wait until they feel a pinch in the wallet to actually respond to the needs and desires of their consumers and customers? You see, folks, it shows that the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism have eked their way so deep into society that we no longer face the idea that it's important to stand up for the desires of consumers, that we stand up for right and wrong. We've lost sight of that because we try and relate morality to everyone, saying everyone has an equally valid position. Or, as Roger Goodell had said there, every one of these players that have strong opinions have their rights. Well, of course. But one of the consequences for voicing opinions like that is that you bear the consequences of it. If that means you lose your job, that means you lose your job. And that's not violating the First Amendment, as so many of these frothing at the mouth leftists try to use. And isn't it funny that they always just selectively apply the Constitution? Whenever it fits one of their pet projects, that's when they turn to it. But the First Amendment does not apply to private industry or private sector things, only to governmental encroachment and abridging of free speech rights. But that's something that seems to be difficult to understand in modern society. We see that during the primary process, the gutless opposition party, or GOP nominee, the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Vulgarian, Donald J. Trump, who also happens to go by the two alter egos of either John Barron or John Miller on any given day, misunderstood the application of the First Amendment, saying that those protesters that had shut down an event of his were violating or infringing upon his First Amendment rights. Except I don't remember those people being government or part of the government. Rather, what I remember them being is private citizens. Was it morally reprehensible what they did? Of course. But was it a violation of his fundamental and inalienable God-given rights? No, that's rubbish. That's ludicrous. That has no connection with reality. But it does show that we have this great problem of misunderstanding and misconstruing our fundamental and inalienable rights and the proper constitutional scope and application of government. And so as that continues to be a major problem and a headache for all of us, we are going to see more and more of this ridiculousness just continue with respect to people like Roger Goodell. And to say that he would possibly punish players who honor 9/11, because that was a secondary part of what he was saying in that clip, but I just didn't get to it. He says, of course, at first, that I support our players speaking out on issues they think need to be changed in our society. We don't live in a perfect society, Matt. So you see, there again is one of those connections with respect to the alt-right and the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, because they too believe that we are mistaking society for being perfect. Well, damn it. It's not that we are mistaking society for being perfect. It's that of all the societies on God's green earth, which is the most free? Which is the one that allows you to reach whatever height that you can imagine? Which is the one that really does strive from its very roots and foundations to try and allow you to be whatever you put your mind to whatever you set your heart and soul to? There's only one nation that is founded upon the natural law principles that allow that to come to fruition and to be an intrinsic and inherent part of its culture and society, and that is none other than the United States of America. But people like Roger Goodell don't care. He also said that it would be within his power, and indeed within his interest, to try and punish those players who honor 9/11 because it might infringe the other players. That must come to an end. That shows that he is just as out of touch as the CEO of Target was, as all of these people who are trying to destroy our God-given liberties and rights are. We have got to get back to a modicum of sanity in this country. And the only way to do that is to return to basics. And basics, as we have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is found within the clear and concise language inside the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And there really is something that we see awry in this country. And with respect to Roger Goodell, recall that they also wouldn't allow the Dallas Cowboys to have a special symbol on their uniforms for those police officers who were slaughtered in Dallas months ago. Remember that? What was that about? Again, it shows that there is a political narrative, a political perception, a political agenda that is being foisted upon us by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, and they have infiltrated just these various facets of our daily lives. And so when you map that out, you see that it just goes step by step by step into the minutia of everything, perverting society from within. This is cultural Marxism. This, folks, is what they were hoping to achieve in the Frankfurt School when they decided to redefine the way in which Marxism would be applied in the wake of the First World War. And so their entire impetus there, their entire focus there was about trying to redefine the nation, to cause societal rot from within. And if you recall that one of the things that you always see with these fanatical and just frothing at the mouth left-wing ideologues is that they despise and attempt to destroy the culture and society that preceded their system. Again, it's because deep down in their heart of hearts, they fully realize that in the free marketplace of ideas, that no one would of their own fruition accept their dark and twisted machinations. And that's why they have to couch it in fluff words. That's why they have to create these buzzwords that cause people to shut down their mental faculties and to stop reasoning, because ultimately what it is they are diametrically opposed to the natural law, which can be universally understood by all of humanity simply by implementing, utilizing our logic, rationality, and reason. And so as that continues to unfurl in this nation, we see that they have to double down on this. They have to try and corrupt society because society has norms or social mores. And social mores are what we consider decent and good behavior. It creates a system in which society can properly function, and that is what is deteriorating. That is what the blight of this sort of dark and twisted machination and embracing the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism have brought about in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. It ultimately always ties into destabilizing society, destroying our culture, and moving forth with something that truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States. But again, we have to be the ones that put an end to it. We have to be the ones that look between the lines and find the truth. And that, I know, is far easier said than done, particularly in this fast-paced society in which we live today, in which everything that we try and do has been co-opted by instantaneous communication, constant contact. It really is enough to wear us down. It really is enough to tear down our health. And it's all done to basically create bread and circuses, not technology itself, but all of these distractors, all of these things such as identity politics and the various other dark and twisted machinations that have been embraced by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist left, and to a lesser extent by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, the so-called establishment leadership of the Republican Party. It's to take us away from the American people having a say. It's to push us into a caste system that is diametrically opposed to our foundational roots as a nation and as a people, and it is to give credence and credibility to things like what we see with Colin Kaepernick. Now, in my mind, what Colin Kaepernick was doing and what Roger Goodell was allowing, or was basically saying is allowable, is to reward bad behavior. You know, society used to ostracize people for stuff like that. Society used to be a quick way to keep people in line. But because of moral relativism and this idea that all forms of morality have a legitimate basis and that there is no one true right way of doing things, has set foot in this country, society no longer ostracizes like that, except that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are quick to use fake or faux outrage to use as a weapon through the cancerous doctrine of political correctness to silence people, to abridge their fundamental and inalienable right to freedom of expression as is guaranteed by the clear and concise language of the First Amendment. And it's such an important aspect of the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, that it was put there as the first part. That it, along with the free press, is one of the ways that we can be watchdogs and whistleblowers against a rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate government. You see, again, it falls back on us, it being the onus of responsibility, falls on our shoulders in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty to bring this nation back from the brink of ruination. Again, it is only we, the people, that can properly place this nation back onto the path of prosperity. But the only way that we can ever hope to practically achieve that is to unlock the chains and shackles that have been restraining the American people in their capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. And again, it's why we have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that key has been with us since the inception of this great nation. And that key is none other than the United States Constitution. But as we see with this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle, none of the two major candidates for the two mainstay political parties are interested in the Constitution. They're not advocating for returning to strict adherence to the clear and concise language of the Constitution at all levels of government. And as a result, we are going to see the rank and rampant corruption continue. We're going to see this sort of malicious behavior exhibited by people like Colin Kaepernick just continue ad nauseum and just get even worse. And it really does place the nation in a precarious position. And the reason that I can say that with the utmost amount of confidence, as I do, sitting here, speaking into the microphone, conveying this message unto you, is that when you stop and look at it, and you see the way that we are just encountering this over and over and over again, and that it continues to get worse and worse with election cycle after successive election cycle, you have to realize that what they're doing is not advocating the best interests of the American people, that they are working at carving out a niche to destroy the nation, to push the nation further away from its roots, and thereby leaving us in a deplorable position, one that it will be exceedingly difficult to overcome, and that it will be from within that we wither and die. And of course, that has been one of the warnings that our leaders have said for centuries now, folks. There will not be some existential thing that destroys the United States. There will not be some foreign power per se that will destroy the United States. It will be national suicide that kills us. And we have come close to the brink of that before. But it has been sustained. And it has been well orchestrated for the past century and a half now, folks. So that they have been working so tirelessly, so patiently, and that they have such faith in their cause, because they certainly don't have faith in anything else, They don't have faith in the natural law tenets. A nerd-faced boy in me, Sanders, would never find value in the natural law because he's one of the self-avowed socialists that pushes for, moral relativism. They don't believe in natural law tenets. They don't believe in the perpetual nature of those rights that were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. But they do have faith in socialism. They do have faith in a system that has no proven track record of working. Everywhere that it has ever been implemented or attempted in human culture and civilization, it has unequivocally failed. Well, that's unacceptable. That's intolerable. That would never really work in the United States, and it shouldn't, because pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is known as the Supremacy Clause, there is a hierarchy of what the law is, and again, one of those natural law tenets is the supreme law of the land. That's something that is deeply rooted in us, going back to the medieval period there with Magna Carta. And it has evolved over time to be more inclusive, to embrace and encompass the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, as indeed the very definition of sovereignty has evolved over time. But the true aspect of the natural law tenets are still there. They are immutable. They do not change. They are an intrinsic part of who we are, both as a nation and as a people. And that is so important for us to realize, because it's at the heart of the problems that we are facing. And so what we see with the NFL is just a mere symptom of the overarching problems that have been ailing us and afflicting us for such a long and extended period of time. And unfortunately, folks, it shows no signs of improving at any time in the foreseeable future. And I wish that that weren't so, but it literally is where we are right now. But we see that Wayne Newton, to the NFL American haters, has come out and basically said, if you don't like the country, get the hell out. What an amazing thing to see. This was over at the Wright Scoop. Even Wayne Newton has strong feelings about Kaepernick's anthem protest. And it's so amazing, because when you stop and think about it, what they are trying to do is engage in divisiveness, and is to try and plunge American citizen against American citizen. And I'm going to once again shut off the camera because I've got a soundbite here, and I want to make sure bandwidth is perfectly good and flowing with this. And I'm going to then switch over to the monitor so that we can listen into this, as I think it's very important that we hear this message.
And I think every American has the right to say and do whatever it is that that freedom offers us. However, during the national anthem is not a time or a place to show that kind of thing. Okay. And I have no tolerance at all for it. And I support their right to say what they believe and how they believe it, but
just don't like
that's the wrong place and time.
Right. So if they don't like it, what?
Get the hell out.
What a beautiful way to put it. And what a succinct way to put it. Because what that ultimately shows is that he has the right view with respect to it, that he is seeing it in the way that it was meant to be. That has the deeper connotations as to what matters in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. It is through that sort of mindset that we have become strong. You see, he says they have the right to say it, but unlike what Roger Goodell said, to compare it, it's not based on this notion of, well, they just have the right to do it, and therefore we should just bow down and allow it to happen because we here at the National Football League, or NFL, are all about moral relativism and political correctness. No. There is a right and wrong. And you see what what Wayne Newton was doing there was showing that some of us still have those natural law tenets inscribed on our hearts, that some of us still know that certain type of behavior is unacceptable and intolerable. That is the type of ostracism that used to be a much greater and significant portion of the American society, that we wouldn't go forth and tolerate these sorts of twisted machinations that have been put out to pervert the American people, to try and destabilize our nation and our society. But more importantly than that, our culture. Because you see, our culture is deeply rooted in the law. It's why, again, we say that the natural law tenets are by their nature timeless, and that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. But why is that so important? Because it is the only thing that defines us. We don't have an official national language, even though we've spoken English since our inception. We don't have a state religion. So, for instance, in Great Britain, they could try and rally around or coalesce around or define themselves around the state church, that of the Church of England. We specifically prohibit that sort of established religion in the United States. Again, it falls back to what our founding fathers thought was so important that they included it right at the top of the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. The First Amendment. And that's freedom of religion, but there's also the free exercise of religion. So you see, it is a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk that we have to do here in order to maintain our essential liberties. And recall that one of the prophetic things that one of our greatest founding fathers in Benjamin Franklin said is that those who sacrifice essential liberties for a fleeting sense of security deserve neither liberty nor security, and shall surely have neither. What that ties to is this notion of self-accountability and self-responsibility, and those two fundamental pillars of our society. The cornerstone, as embodied by the Constitution of our society, work in tandem to create self-determination. Why is it that the American people have always been these strong, robust supporters of liberty and freedom? The reason that we are such strong supporters and robust supporters of freedom and liberty and of rugged individualism is that is the systemic part of our DNA. Not racism, as Barack Hussein Obama would have you believe, because if you recall, it was a while ago, I think almost a year ago now, folks, that he went in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and attempted to say that racism is an inherent part of the DNA of these United States of America, and therefore it cannot be fixed, that it's systemic, and that we need to embrace that and realize that. What a bunch of bovine excrement. What a bunch of ludicrous nonsense that truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of the United States. But you see, folks, that's the disingenuous nature, the intellectually disingenuous nature of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who have done everything in their power to try and hold us back. Compare that to what we had upheld as our principles and values. Compare the type of statesmen that we had at the inception of this nation some 235 plus years ago to the candidates we have today. Now, here's an interesting story that ties into that. Bill Clinton's former CIA director has joined the Trump campaign. And so what do we have to say about that? What can we take away from that? The Washington Free Beacon has brought this story up, and it was published today by Natalie Johnson. And it says that James Woolsey, who headed the CIA under former President Bill Clinton, will serve as a senior advisor to Donald Trump on national security, defense, and intelligence. The Republican nominee's campaign announced this on Monday, today. Woolsey, a self-described lifelong Democrat, told CNN soon after the announcement that he supports Trump's defense budget proposal, which includes a commitment to lift the restraints on defense spending. And that was reported in The Hill. He also said that Trump is more willing to protect the privacy of classified information, citing Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her time as Secretary of State. He went on to say she demonstrated a complete lack of understanding and an inability to lead the agency she headed in such a way as to maintain its mission and security. So here we see that Trump is once again not, being a conservative. He's not reaching out to conservative people. He's placing in lifelong Democrats who are not conservative. Now, maybe what Woolsey was saying there has some sense to it. It does, but it shows that if he is a lifelong Democrat, it means that he doesn't have the interest of conservative values deeply rooted in his heart. It means that he is not going to stand up for the best interest of these United States of America. And again, it's something that we should be completely wary of. But of course, the Lion Branch Trumpidians who suffer from acute ostrich syndrome, meaning they shove their heads up their posterior as opposed to in the sand, are going to cower in their Trumpidian tabernacle and disregard the truth. They will see the truth as something that should be ignored, as they have all throughout this rather disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle. But again, it also shows that Trump is going to be malleable. Recall that he stated in his so-called magnus opus that was actually written by a ghostwriter, The Art of the Deal, or is that The Art of the Squeal, or The Art of the Steal? I'm not sure which. But he said that he will always start off or initiate in his supposedly bigly great and wonderfully plans of perfect hair forever of the most hardline position, and then whittle his way back in negotiations until he actually reaches the position that he desired from the outset. In other words, he is about bamboozling people. He has pulled off a great con game, and he has literally swept the rug out from under the feet of disillusioned conservatives. Keep in mind, folks, that is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have reiterated so frequently on previous episodes that Donald J. Trump, the Don Con Trumpolini, is literally the Pied Piper of disillusioned or dissatisfied conservatives. And therefore, he has been able to carry out this twisted plan to try and force his way into the gutless opposition party. And he has successfully done that. He has successfully carried that out to fruition and has hopelessly divided the base of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. It means that we truly are in an untenable, unsustainable, and unelectable position for this general election cycle slated for later this November. But of course, that ties in with something where people are trying to say that the health of Hillary Rotten Clinton is of a major concern, and that she is going to lose because of these negative images that have been going off in the Twitter sphere and social media, maybe also on some of the general media outlets. I don't think so. The Democrats have a history of always supporting their candidate, irrespective of whether they're in good health or not. And the true adherents and the true rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media will diligently and dutifully do whatever they can to sweep that under the rug. Recall that with FDR, who suffered from polio and lost the ability to walk and was always in frail health, that they hid that from the general population. They also held back and hid most of the problems and health ailments that was suffered by John F. Kennedy before his assassination. So again, they hide that of the Democrats, who they have always been in bed with. In fact, they have become a titular wing of that now Fabian socialist-dominated party, and that has been their modus operandi for at least a half century, but actually much greater than that, at least for 70 years. But there's a deeper meaning to that as well. It shows that these nefarious forces that are diametrically, by their nature, opposed to the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, are willing to go out on a limb to corrupt our culture and society. And we see that that also ties in with the way that they have infiltrated our regular media, our entertainment, all of those mediums that we use to essentially unwind and relax in the United States, they have infiltrated that, and of course they are utilizing that to further degrade and to further disintegrate the societal fabric of these United States of America. So again, it requires that we, the people, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, come forth and make the realization that these nefarious forces are pitting themselves against us and are hoping to utilize the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactics and strategies of divide and conquer in order to pit American citizen against American citizen in the hopes that we will tear out each other's jugular and thereby bleed out the lifeblood of the United States. And you see, it all ties into that Cloward and Piven sort of thought process. Recall that Cloward and Piven were those egghead academicians from Columbia University who, back in the midpoint of the 20th century, decided that what they needed to do was to overhaul the American welfare system that had been established by FDR during the Great Depression under his social policy known as the New Deal. So what they wanted to do was overwhelm that, to create so many problems, to create such a downtrodden, overzealous approach within the country that when the system was overtaxed, that it would, by necessity, knock the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this representative republic of ours to their knees. And then they were hoping that the next logical step would be that those very wielders of popular sovereignty would then crawl on bended knee to the government that created the system and thereby created that problem to begin with, to find a solution for that problem that would create a more permanent welfare state in these United States of America. Well, it's a similar attribute that we see with so-called cultural Marxism. These cultural Marxists are the ones that try to delve into these rather laughable and ludicrous claims of being for social justice. What exactly is social justice? Well, it's certainly not true justice. It's not blind justice. It's not the type of justice that is deeply rooted in the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of not only our shared United States Constitution, but also our constitutionally endowed federalist representative Republican form of government. Rather, it's based in nihilism and Marxism. These are the very tenets that we must keep in mind. This is the problem that we face in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. But unfortunately, it shows no signs of improving at any time in the foreseeable future, because people have been pushed or led astray into this position and whipped up into such an emotional frenzy that they have shut down their logical capabilities, their logical faculties, and they are rawly emoting. And what is so inherently dangerous about that, folks, is it makes us easily manipulated. It makes us highly susceptible to the twisted and dark machinations of these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are, yes, as we have this conversation right now, are attempting to hostilely take over the gutless opposition party, or GOP. And folks, it's not so much that I care just about the GOP. Rather, it's I am concerned about the vitality and future viability of this once thriving and flourishing republic of ours. Because wherever we turn, we see that these forces are working at undermining the foundation of our nation, of our people, of our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity. And you see, that is the true nefarious and dark aspect of identity politics. It is why it is being utilized, much like the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, to undermine us and to pit us against one another. It's all about distraction. So in a sense, when you see in our entertainment industry all of this push to try and normalize homosexual behavior and to try and make Americans accepting of same-sex marriage, and all of this unraveling of our time-honored institutions and traditions as well as values, it's all part of a deeper assault on liberty. It's all part of, once again, undermining the fact that we here in the United States of America have, since our inception, some 235 plus years ago, been meant to be a virtuous republic. In fact, our founding fathers said that that was a necessity. And keep in mind that one of the warnings that was said all the way back at the inception of this nation was that the republic would cease to exist once a certain segment or faction of the population had discovered that it could vote itself to leech off of the rest of society, to have a free system, to get by off of the fruits of the labors of their fellow popular sovereigns instead of putting forth their own significant efforts. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad thing to have a hand up, but we are seeing that they have perverted it and transformed it into a handout that is essentially forcefully taken from everyone, instead of being a tithing, instead of it being an act of free will. And you see, again, it ties into that overarching message that I said, that of the most important things that we have in humanity is free will, that was one of the things that God gave us that distinguishes us from all of his other creations, including angels. And so when you stop and think about that, it comes back to a deeper, richer meaning. And that deeper, richer meaning is that we here in this nation follow the natural law. It's why that the two fundamental pillars that have defined us and why we have turned to rugged individualism has always been self-accountability and self-responsibility, and those two things working in tandem or in conjunction, thereby creating self-determination, free will, in other words. And when you line that up with the biblical teachings, it makes sense, because the natural law is inherently based off of God's law. That is the law of nature that is inscribed on the hearts and souls of humanity, and that can be universally understood by applying logical reasoning to our everyday situations. So it's a universally understood system of law. And I believe that perhaps the best way to demonstrate that, the best demonstrable example of that, is how in every society at least some form of murder is loathed and despised and is illegal. That murder being an illegal homicide, the unlawful taking of the life of another person with malice aforethought. That is the classical traditional definition of murder, and it is something that is deeply rooted in not just our society, but throughout the world. Because again, there has to be some value to human life. There has to be some value to our individual wills and spirits. And that is something that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists do not believe in. Think back to Bernard Shaw, one of the leading Fabian socialists back with the Fabian Society in Great Britain. He said, he being George Bernard Shaw, said that essentially they would use the useful idiots to propel themselves into the positions of power in society itself, thereby adopting their original iconography of that in a wolf's in sheep's clothing to corrupt and pervert society. And then once they were in, they would, well, at least humanely euthanize them, as though they were some useless cattle, or as though their human decency and dignity didn't matter. And that's part of the whole reason why the abortion debate has been such a heated and contentious thing. It all goes to this notion of trying to escape the burden of self-accountability and self-responsibility, and at the same time, it's looking to devalue individual human dignity and the sovereign spirit of the true individual. And that is truly a dark and twisted machination. It is a wicked evil that is deeply seated in the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist agenda. But they have worked in trying to couch it in terms that are intellectually disingenuous, to try and make it sound more benign or innocuous than it really is. For instance, saying they are pro-choice. Well, what does that actually mean? What they are is pro-abortion. But we can certainly back that up when they say that they're pro-choice. Okay, then let us have the choice to not bake cakes for gay weddings. No, 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 you can't do that. If you're putting yourself out as a business, that has to be forced. Okay, let's say you want the free choice for education. Oh, no, 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 you can't do that because, it's for the collective benefit. You see, it's not about freedom of choice, or if it is about any type of freedom of choice, it is about a collective group, collective bargaining. That's why they're in bed with labor unions, because anything that goes against individualism, anything that seeks to undermine the well-established principles and tenets of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours is something they embrace. It's why they are the Blame America First crowd. But it truly is a disgusting position they accept. It is truly an untenable situation that they try and foist upon the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And again, it's because they inherently distrust the people. In their mind, and deep down in their heart of hearts, and in the dark, twisted penumbras of their souls, they believe that they know best, that they know better than we do, that we need some centralized authority to control the nation. But what's so dark and diabolical, as well as twisted about that type of system, is that when you go back to what it was that our founding fathers were fighting against in that long, drawn-out, bitter and bloody affair known as the American War of Independence, they were fighting against the consolidated and centralized power and authority of the British Crown and Parliament. They were fighting against this notion of virtual representation. And I know that I've mentioned that on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but I believe it bears repeating again here as it ties into the blight that we're seeing. But with Donald Trump, we see that he doesn't embrace the conservative norms. And that's why back when he appeared on the late Tim Russert's Meet the Press in 1999, he was the one that said that his values would be different from the voters of Iowa and from various other facets of American society because those are New York values that he embraced. But deep down, he wants centralization. Recall that he was for the Bureau of Land Management, malarkey, and manipulation to go in and kick ranchers off of their property to stir up this animosity. And when you look at our westerlymost states, you'll find that the vast majority of the land out there is literally owned by the federal government. But again, when you go back to the clear and concise language that's contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, you'll find that the federal government was never meant to be able to own property like we the people. Again, property is one of those fundamental and inalienable God-given rights that forms the basic foundation of our culture, our society, and our community of popular sovereigns. Recall that of the self-evident truths that Thomas Jefferson mentioned when penning the Declaration of Independence, he said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain fundamental and inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what is it that we can extrapolate from that term, the pursuit of happiness? It has been extrapolated to mean property. It has been expounded upon to mean that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, cannot be denied without due process under the law of our ability to own property. And it was such a significant value that you see that there is this eminent domain prohibition against unreasonable and unlawful takings without just compensation. And what that was for was to provide for public services where there needed to be a taking, but they had to pay the property owner before they could take the property, and it was meant to be used only for public needs. But we see with the Kello decision that changed, that all of a sudden they could utilize eminent domain to try and take away private property from one citizen to give to another citizen if the government thought that that would increase their taxable base. It's a ludicrous position. It is one that is truly dark, maniacal, twisted, and has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of these United States of America. But we know for a fact that Donaldolph Julius Caesar Trumpolini would continue to abide by that would be the sort of system that he would implement, because it's how he conducted himself during business. And he used his frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist sister, who was a judge, to forum shop for her so that he could get rulings that were in his favor with respect to those types of eminent domain cases. And so as a private citizen, he was demonstrably and undeniably and unequivocally opposed to the sovereign rights of the people. And he went out of his way to try and use this system to gain for himself, irrespective of the detrimental and deleterious impact that it would have on its fellow popular sovereigns. And so why do we think he's going to act any differently if he somehow, by some cruel twist of fate or some fluke of history, manages to become the next commander-in-chief of the United States of America? Folks, he is 70 years old, and it reminds me of that old adage that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. He has no interest in learning about proper governance. He has demonstrated time and time again that he has no working knowledge or understanding of our shared United States Constitution and the proper scope and application of government as outlined, and yes, indeed, even mandated by the Constitution, and therefore he is not qualified to be president. At the same time, neither is Hillary Rodham Clinton. And so you see that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, are caught between a rock and a hard place. A rock and a hard place in which either one of these mainstay nominees for the two titular political parties are going to be benefiting the American people. So, in other words, it means we find ourselves in a difficult position, one that shows no signs of improving at any time in the foreseeable future. And I hate to say that. I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to convey, but with respect to this and this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle, I can find no such words to convey. But what does it mean that we are facing this sort of nonsense? It shows that there is a cultural war that is raging in the confines of our nation. And it shows that we must be ever vigilant, not only fostering that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, but also to understand what's right and wrong, what's good and what's decent. And we see that there are in these conflicts people like Kate Upton firing at the NFL American haters, just saying enough is enough. Enough with this type of depravity. Enough with this selfish, childish barbarism. And yes, folks, I did go out on a limb there and label it as barbarism because I can think of no more of an apt term to properly define it. You see, it requires that we pay attention. It requires that we will have to be proactive in maintaining and safeguarding our liberties and taking a proper stance for common decency, for understanding that the flag and our national anthem represent the true spirit of all of us, that our collective history includes good and bad, but when you actually stop and examine it under the totality of the circumstances, you will find that the United States of America is on balance far more often good than bad. And yes, we are far from being a perfect society. There is no such thing as perfection in this moral realm in which we live. That is just one of those inescapable facts of life, one of those undeniable aspects of what it means to be alive. Humans are fallible. always have been, and always will be. But to recognize that we should still strive to achieve something better, to achieve a more perfect thing, that is the beauty of the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation, not only of our shared United States Constitution, but also our federalist representative Republican form of government. You see, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we are the only ones that are endowed with the authority and the wherewithal, once again, from our Creator, the God of nature himself, to place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. And again, this is why we say you shouldn't look for some messianic figure who claims to have some tonic that will cure all the ails of this nation. Because if they claim that they, in and of their own fruition and by themselves, can save the nation, isn't the flip side of that that they also wield the power and possess the power to ultimately destroy and wreck the nation into ruination? And think about this, folks. The whole sort of imagery and iconography and comparisons that the Trump campaign attempts to foist on the American people is that of a wrecking ball. Do we want to restore this nation, or do we want to destroy this nation? If we want to destroy, that's what a wrecking ball is. That is why I have had such problems, such deeply rooted problems and disagreements with this idea of Trump claiming he's the wrecking ball. That's not what we need. We need to restore the nation, not tear it down. We shouldn't go like he did at the Bonwit Teller building, where he destroyed the Art Deco beautiful statues that were culturally and historically significant aspects of the New York skyline, to then put up that ugly, just avant-garde building that he did. That tower is just overly ostentatious. It's just oozing with autocratic, dictatorial hypocrisy. And that, too, is not something we should accept in the United States of America. We should accept what it is to be the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. We should accept the beauty that is inherent within us, and that is certainly not what Donald Trump is doing. There is no beauty about the man. He may surround himself with beautiful things, but in the end, he is plagued by nemesis to look upon his dandruff-covered reflection and just oogle himself nonstop, as that was what happened to Narcissus. And yes, there is no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump is a narcissist, and that narcissism is part of the problem that is afflicting this nation. I would also say that Colin Kaepernick is a narcissist. That's why he tries to go out and make such a hullabaloo and brouhaha out of this national anthem thing. And then there are people within the entertainment industry of the National Football League, or NFL, and ESPN that are going to be punished or have been threatened with sanctions and punishment for standing up for our country and standing up for the symbolism that our nation represents, or what also represents our nation. Freedom is inherently a good thing. Freedom is what we should all value, because freedom is at the heart of why our founding fathers were so willing to risk everything. But above all, it's sacred honor. We must once again embrace that, both as a nation and as a people, because it is an intrinsic part of who we are. And it is one of the few avenues by which we will know whether or not we're being led astray by these nefarious forces that are hell-bent on our utter annihilation. You see, it is so important that we ask these deep and soul-searching questions and prod the collective soul of these United States of America to ensure that we are standing up for those time-honored and time-valued traditions and institutions. Because they are not bad, as these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists would have you believe. They do not work against that which is of the utmost importance to us. In fact, they are intrinsic characteristics of who we are as a nation and as a people. And keeping all of that in mind, that is what we must realize to basically and literally place this nation back onto the path of prosperity. So it once again is the onus of duty, obligation, but above all responsibility being placed on the shoulder of we the people in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty to go forth and place this nation back onto the path of prosperity. No one else can do that because no one else has the ownership role of our nation. Because again, when you look at the poetic, the beautiful opening lines to our preamble to the United States Constitution, it clearly states in no uncertain terms that we the people are the ones that ordained and established the Constitution and thereby the government of the United States of America. And therefore it means that that power is delegated. And the Constitution itself is the contract that contains the terms and conditions by which the proper scope and application of government is to operate. And when you look again at the First Amendment, you will see that the people have the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That ties directly into this notion that the people are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, and that they are the ones who are in control. That is the powerful message that we need to embrace. That is the uplifting aspect of leading to an enlightenment that will spark a renaissance in this nation, the likes of which we have not seen or witnessed or experienced in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Folks, she will stand for the national anthem, or you can push her out of the plane. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. On top of that, I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here at our YouTube page or our Google Plus page. And in addition, you can follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. There is also the departure board listing our Blogspot page where we are placing audio-only versions of our state-of-the-art radio program. And then there is the Cafe Press account, where you can express your own free will and identity by purchasing all sorts of accessories and attire with our original classical Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo, or our first class passenger logo on it. There's drinking glasses, shot glasses, computer bags, and laptop covers. There's tote bags and phone protectors and covers, hats, watches, clocks, you name it, it's there. Take a look, give us a little bit of support so that we can keep bringing you this wonderful show. And as always, folks, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We'll see you again next time. Do take care.